Hi guys, welcome back to Read With Me, LG. I have a fun little book for you today, and this is Mr. Mess by Robert Hargreaves. So there's a whole set of these about different little characters. I used to read these when I was little. I think you guys will like it. If you've ever seen the movie Elemental, it's kind of like that, except for instead of emotions, these are just like things we may get up to, things we may do. So, some are emotions too. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this. This is Mr. Mess by Robert Hargreaves. And we're going to jump right in, okay? All right. Mr. Messy was the messiest person you've ever met in your whole life. He lived in a particularly messy looking house. The paint was peeling, the windows were broken, the garden gate was off its hinges. And had Mr. Messy cut the grass in his garden lately? He had not. So there's Mr. Messy's house. So you can see the paint chipping and broken, the windows cracked, the garden gate is broken. Mr. Messy. One morning, Mr. Messy woke up in his messy bed, yawned, scratched, got up, brushed his teeth, leaving the top off the toothpaste, had his breakfast, spilling cornflakes on the floor, and then set out for a walk, tripping over a broom he'd left lying in the garden 2 weeks before. So poor Mr. Messy. He was just having a rough start. Mr. Messy walked through the woods behind his house. He walked and walked right through the woods until he came to the other side. And do you know what he found? Mr. Messy found the neatest looking little cottage he had ever seen. So that one has the paint together and just very opposite of his, right? There was a man in the garden clipping the hedge. He looked up at Mr. Messy as Mr. Messy approached. "Good morning, I'm Mr. Messy," said Mr. Messy. "I can see that," replied the man, looking him up and down. "I'm Mr. Tidy." "And I'm Mr. Neat," said another man. "Tidy and neat," said Mr. Tidy. "Neat and tidy," said Mr. Neat. Oops, sorry. So there's one of them. And you can tell by his face, he's a little surprised at what he sees when he sees Mr. Messy, right? "We're in business together," explained Mr. Tidy. "The people who own this house have asked us to do some work for them." "What sort of work?" asked Mr. Messy. "Oh, we make things neat and tidy," said Mr. Neat. "Perhaps we could come along and do some work for you," said Mr. Tidy, looking at Mr. Messy. "But I don't want things neat and tidy," said Mr. Messy. So Neat and Tidy want to help out Messy, huh? "Nonsense," said Mr. Tidy. "Fiddlesticks," said Mr. Neat. "But," said Mr. Messy. "Come along," said Mr. Neat. "Off we go," said Mr. Tidy. But," said Mr. Messy. "But nothing," said Mr. Neat, and off they all went to Mr. Messy's house on the other side of the woods. So there they go. Neat and Tidy. They're going to deal with Mr. Messy. "Good heavens," said Mr. Neat when he saw where Mr. Messy lived. "Good gracious me," added Mr. Tidy. "This is the messiest house I have ever seen in all my born days," they both said at the same time. "Better do something about it," said Mr. Neat. Before Mr. Messy could open his mouth, the two of them were rushing about Mr. Messy's house. Mr. Neat hoed and mowed and pruned and snipped and clipped and dug and made the garden look neater than it had ever looked before. Pretty flowers, right? Mr. Tidy cleaned and primed and rubbed and painted and mended and made the outside of Mr. Messy's house look tidier than it had ever looked before. Because you remember what it looked like before, right? There was chipping paint and cracked windows, and look at that. Totally different. Then they both went inside the home. "Good heavens," said Mr. Neat. "Good gracious," said Mr. Tidy, and they both set about cleaning the house from top to bottom. They brushed and swept and polished and scrubbed and made the inside of the house look neater and tidier than it had ever looked before. What's Mr. Messy gonna say? "There we are," said Mr. Tidy. "All finished," said Mr. Neat. "Tidy and neat," said Mr. Tidy. "Neat and tidy," said Mr. Neat. Mr. Messy didn't know what to say. So there they are. They look very proud, right? They feel good about what they did. And then they both looked at Mr. Messy. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Mr. Neat said to Mr. Tidy. Precisely, said Mr. Tidy. What we're both thinking, they said together to Mr. Messy, is that you look much too messy to live in a neat and tidy house like this. But, said Mr. Messy. So does he look happy? No, right? He looks sad. So they've done all this nice work for him, but he's not sure how he feels about it. And then they said he looks messy. That's not maybe the nicest way to say that, right? But whatever Mr. Messy said was no use, and Mr. Neat and Mr. Tidy whisked him off to the bathroom upstairs. Then Mr. Neat got hold of one of Mr. Messy's arms, and Mr. Tidy got hold of another arm, and they picked him up and put him in the bathtub. Mr. Messy wasn't used to taking baths. There he is. Again, does he look happy? No, he looks sad, right? Mr. Neat and Mr. Tidy washed and brushed and cleaned and scrubbed and combed Mr. Messy until he didn't look like Mr. Messy at all. In fact, he looked the opposite of messy. He looked at himself in the mirror. You know what I'm going to have to do now? He said You know what I'm going to have to do now? He said in a rather fierce voice. Mr. Neat and Mr. Tidy looked worried. So here he is. Does that look like the Mr. Messy we've seen? No. Very different, right? What are you going to have to do? They asked Mr. Messy. I'm going to have to change my name, he said. And then they all laughed together and became the best of friends. And that really is the end of the story, except to say that if you're a messy sort of person, you might have a visit from two people. So there they are at the end. He's okay with it, right? And you know what they are called, don't you? That's what it says. I don't know. There's no picture. I don't know. What do you think they're called? Neat, tidy, and clean? Mr. Clean? Maybe. I can go with that. Neat, tidy, and clean. You might have other ideas, too, for what his new name is, because he's not messy anymore, right? I would say it's a very nice tale of helping other people out, and maybe some of us are not as clean as others, right? And sometimes people need some help, but you gotta be careful because you can't just turn somebody else into somebody you want them to be, right? Sometimes they are who they are. But, and I called this Mr. Mess at the beginning. I didn't realize there was a price sticker covering a Y. So this is Mr. Messy. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And I'm glad you're here with me today. And I'll see you next time on Read With Me, LG. Bye, guys.